Welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and today I wanted to talk through all six first-year head coaches in the SEC and kind of project, grade out almost who's going to do the best in their first season. Not overall win-loss, but really relative to their expectations, right? Because if I just asked you which first-year head coach in the SEC will do the best, everybody will say Lane Kiffin or Pete Golding, just by nature of what LSU and Ole Miss figure to be. But that's a little boring, right? So I kind of wanted to take it a bit of a different angle and talk about which coach could do the best for their program because really that's what matters most for their jobs and for their fan base's happiness. But before we get into those six, if you have been enjoying all this football content and you want even more as the season presses on, subscribe to me here, follow me on Twitter at Will Thomas CFB. Check out A Peek Inside SEC Football, where I do a weekly show with Allie Peek and TJ Pittenger. We'll be covering the SEC all fall, all season long. So let's get straight into it. We're just going to go alphabetically here, give a little state of the coach. That's not a phrase, but for each guy, and then we'll talk about projections. So Ryan Silverfield at Arkansas. I think he's being slightly overlooked in the grand scope of things, just in terms of, new coaches in the league. Because it's Arkansas, right? So it's one of the lower profile jobs. And he was not super, really an exciting hire. Right? Obviously, Lane was the most exciting hire, but, Summerall had been linked for years. A guy like Alex Golesh had been linked for years. And Silverfield's name had come up, but he was kind of an afterthought in the rest of the SEC hires. Now, I don't say all that to come back and say, well, this year he's going to shock, he's going to blow you away. But I do believe he's in a spot where he could get Arkansas playing competitive football again pretty soon, and maybe a little sooner than most people think, because he's already gotten a good bit of investment, right? Because Arkansas has the capacity to invest in sports, right? We're seeing it with basketball, right? Hiring Calipari and all those rosters. So they have the capacity to spend on sports, and Silverfield just needs to be able to unlock that, right? There is plenty of Walmart money to dig into there for the Razorbacks. Now, this year, right, the roster isn't that great, right? I mean, you're going to have a playmaking quarterback throwing to not many great receivers. Braylon Russell's a good back, but then defensively, Quincy Rhodes Jr. and kind of just who else. So really the goal for Silverfield this year is just show a proof of concept, right? Because you can double your win total from last year and go 4-8 and no one really notices you. But that is still going to be progress, right? Their win total is at 3.5 right now, but really shaded to that over. So the consensus is kind of a 4-8 year for Silverfield and Arkansas. If you can grab a fifth win, that'd be pretty big, right? Because then at 5-7, you might even sneak into a bowl game if teams opt out and stuff like that. So there is a world where if Arkansas makes a bowl game in this first year, that is a massive win for Silverfield. But I think that just 4-8, you let your really good athletes just be great athletes, right, to show your fan base and the country flashes, right? Show a proof of concept to recruits and portal players, and just kind of set the tone for what your tenure at Arkansas is going to be like. Next up is Alex Golesh at Auburn. Now, the variability of outcome for Auburn to me this year is crazy wide, because it kind of goes one of two ways, right? Either the entire offense that came up with him from USF to Auburn, they obviously know each other, but they also click in the SEC. Right, Byron Brown is healthy. He develops as a passer, and DJ Durkin's defense that has at least more continuity than the offense just suffocates people. Right, and it's a really solid unit that allows the offense to just perform pretty well and win a lot of games. There's like a 9-3, 10-2 ceiling for Auburn this year. There really is, if everything goes well. On the other side of that, and where I'm a little bit closer to be totally honest, is I worry a little bit about getting 12 games out of Byron Brown because of how physically he plays and how the caliber of athlete that'll be hitting him every week. The defense should be solid, but I do wonder, just offensively, especially if Byron Brown isn't totally healthy, if they look like an offense from the American playing 10 Power 4 games. Because if they can't scale their performance up this year, that's what they will be. They'll be a team from the American playing 10 Power 4 games, and that can go poorly. Their win total is 6.5. I think I'm right there with a mid-tier bowl for Auburn. I think 6 wins or 7 wins is probably where we're going to be. There is that path to 8-4, 9-3, and even if it is just a 7-win season, but let's say they clip Georgia or they clip LSU, right? You can win just 6 or 7 games, but based on which ones you win, it can be a vastly different feel, right? Like let's say they win the Iron Bowl to get to a bowl game, to get that 6th win, right? That'd be a great end of the year for Alex Golesh and Auburn. So then when it comes to every school, you can look at, well, this record would be good based on who the wins are against and losses are against. For Auburn, I think that's even more true, right? Because they can go 7-5, catch Georgia or catch Alabama, and you have a way different feel than if those 5 losses are all to the 5 ranked teams they play or whatever. So for Golesh, the variability is really high. I lean more towards 6 or 7 wins, but we'll see how he looks. Next up, John Summerall with the Florida Gators. Now, their win total is a game above Auburn at 7.5. And that week 3 matchup between Florida and Auburn, between Summerall and Golish, is really going to be very indicative of how each team season is going to go, in my opinion. But looking at the Gators, they still have a very hard schedule, right? So does every team in the SEC. But it is much easier comparatively to the last 2 schedules that they've had to play, which have just been murderer's rows. That's not wrong coming out of my mouth, but you know what I mean, right? It's a slightly easier schedule where you get home games against, Ole Miss and Oklahoma. You do have to go to Austin. Georgia is obviously at a neutral site. They're in Atlanta this year, but there's tons of talent there, right? Summerall didn't necessarily go out and get a big fish in the portal, but he retained all the guys who were going to portal, right? Like Jaden Ball, Dallas wasn't Jaden Woods, who was actually he put his name in there. Retaining all those guys was great. It's almost somehow worked against him now to where the expectations are higher and he has less of an excuse. Obviously, it is year one, so every coach within year one does have a little more leeway. But I think that Summerall and the Gators are in a really good spot to, at least if they defend Gainesville and they can win in the swamp, they can go 8-4, still losing all the games they should lose. Right? They can avoid's the wrong word, but they don't really have to pull a big upset to win 8 games this year. And I think that that's a really promising outlook for the Gators. So for Summerall, that went till 7.5. I do think 8-4 is about their ceiling. You can maybe say 9-3. I have a hard time getting 10-2 just because of, first year coach. That roster hasn't done it before. But I do believe that the Gators are in a pretty good spot to maybe have the best overall win total of true new coaches. I don't really count Lane and Pete Golding as like true new coaches. They are on this list, but in terms of new coaches to the SEC, I think Summerall can have the highest win total. Will Stein at Kentucky. Now, this I think is going to be my winner for the purpose of this video, right? Which was expectations relative to the school. I absolutely love what Will Stein has done at Kentucky with talent acquisition. I love what he's doing just with the attitude there, how much moxie he's bringing. And I look at Kentucky's win totals at 4.5. Now, their schedule is very hard. Schedule's very hard. But you get Alabama at home in week 2. And Kalen DeBoer's Bama teams have not started off fast. They lost to FSU in week 1 last year. Then they went 10-1. That's a game where you can announce yourself if you're Will Stein at Kentucky really early, right? Week 2 at home against Bama. I believe it's a 3:30 Eastern kick. That could be a big-time message game. And I look at the offense that he's put together because I trust Will Stein's offensive brain. I trust his eval of Kenny Minchey going out and saying, I need you, right? He was committed to Nebraska, was Minchey, but Stein went and took him. The defense is a little bit patchwork, right? I think their defense will hands down be their weaker side of the ball. But you can have a bad to just, not very good defense and go 7-5 and go 6-6. So I'm definitely over on Kentucky's win total this year. I think they can beat it by a game or 2. I am 6-6 or 7-5 for the Wildcats this year. So I think that Stein's bringing a ton of energy. Now, there could also be just, I'm a little bit too excited. Not everything can work out and they go 4-8 or 5-7, but you see flashes. I'm just pretty optimistic about what at least this offense is going to be. So that's why I'm pretty high on Kentucky this year. Lane Kiffin at LSU. This is obviously the biggest spectacle one that we have, maybe in the entire country, right, in terms of a new coach. Just because of how dramatic his exit from Ole Miss was, right? The Florida job opened up first, so he was tied to the Gators originally. Then LSU opened up, and from there it was like, well, man, I mean, he's definitely leaving Ole Miss. Just is it LSU or Florida? Now he's in Baton Rouge. All that money they spent, all the coaches he brought with him, the expectations are rightfully very, very high. One thing I think is important to remember, though, is that Sam Leavitt was not their first option at quarterback out of the portal. Right? I mean, they practically had Brent Torsby committed before Texas Tech called. And there were several other guys that LSU had looked at before Sam Leavitt came. And what's amazing, too, is that Sam Leavitt went on that LSU visit and then left. He was practically going to go to Tennessee before Lane kind of realized that he was out of options, had to go grab him. So that's not to say that Leavitt is not going to work in this scheme. I believe that he can work because it's Lane and Charlie Weiss. But Leavitt was not the guy that they wanted originally. So could this offense maybe not quite be what we thought it might be originally? Defensively, I think it'll be really strong. Offensively will also be very good. But it's a lot of hype. It's a lot of expectations. And it's a lot of new that has to play a lot of tough games. I do think relative to the national narrative, LSU might underperform. But that's mainly because the national narrative is crazy, right? Their win total is 8.5. I think 8-4, 9-3 is right there. But if LSU goes 8-4, 9-3, and probably misses the playoff with both those records, right? At 9-3, I'm not sure LSU gets in. This is going to be viewed as a disappointment, even though I really don't think it should be because of how much new there is and how hard that schedule is. So I think that nationally, you're going to get to a point where LSU, quote unquote, underperformed. But they're going to be totally fine. I do believe that Lane's going to have a lot of success there in Baton Rouge overall. Then finally, it's Pete Golding at Ole Miss. Now, this one I'm really interested in because I have a lot of questions just for the Rebels this year. Pete Golding could be a great coach. He really could be. I think it's very appropriate, though, to say that Ole Miss downgraded at head coach this year. From last year to this year, it is a downgrade at head coach. I think it's the same thing for offensive coordinator. Right, and he's still be running the defense, so it's fine. But staffing wise, I think for this season specifically, right now they downgraded. So then you have to look at their roster. Did their roster upgrade? I'm not totally sure that it did, right? Because offensively, you kept Trinidad, you kept Kewan Lacey. That's great. You pulled in some good receiver pieces, but like a guy like Jonte Cook, a lot of variables there if he can really be a good player. Defensively, you lost Umami Yellen. You lost TJ Dottery. You lost some guys in that secondary. And they backfilled with good talent, but I'm not sure if it's as good. So I look at Ole Miss this year, and this sounds pessimistic, but I think their coaching staff is worse, and I kind of think their roster overall is worse. Now, their win total, I believe, is 8.5 as well. Let me fact check that in real time. 7.5, excuse me. Their win total is 7.5, but very shaded to that over. So, you open up with Louisville. I think that Jeff Brom at this point probably a better coach than Pete Golding, so you never know what could happen there. You have LSU week 3 at Florida week 4. They have a very hard start to their schedule. They could start off slow and then get hot. They could start off hot and stay hot. This Ole Miss team is such a wild card just because of how much new there is on the coaching staff, and you don't really know how the roster compares to last year's. So I think for Golding, the expectations this year, I mean, if you beat LSU, if you beat Lane, you get a lot of leeway for the rest of the year. Right? They could go 8-4, 7-5, and they beat LSU, and I'm not really sure how much Ole Miss fans might overall complain. But if you lose to LSU and go 7-5, noise could get pretty loud. But I do believe that Golding is a good guy there for the Rebels. I just think he needs to get that experience right before I can really say that Ole Miss takes that jump under him. So with all those 6 coaches in mind, I teased it. I do believe that relative to program expectations, you see Will Stein do the best this season. I just think that Kentucky's expectation, we haven't adjusted to the talent level that they now have and how offensive they can be. Because if you score a ton of points, you can win a ton of games. And that's what I believe Kentucky can do. So I don't know. I don't think the national perception has adjusted for Kentucky enough this year. So I think he can really exceed. But I think Summerall, in terms of coaches new to the SEC, he'll have the most wins. Stein will have the best performance relative to their school. But probably look at a guy like Lane or even Pete, even though I just did bring up some criticisms about them, they'll have the best overall year, and those two are by far the most likely of those new coaches to make the playoffs. So thank you for watching this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. Like I said before, subscribe to me here and follow me on Twitter. Go check out a peek inside SEC football on YouTube. We'll be doing this every single day, all fall. Greatest sport on the planet, man. So thank you so much for watching this episode. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.